Steven Bartlett is one of the most successful YouTube entrepreneurs in the world. His podcast has more than 1 billion views and generates $25 million per year. Many years ago, I personally worked with Steven on his first ever business back when he was in a very different position. I'm Jarmain Patrick, and this is Industry Tales Episode 1. This is Industry Tales Episode 1, and I'm going to be talking about my relationship with Steven Bartlett. Now, this is part 1 of a 5-part series where I break down successful YouTube entrepreneurs that I've personally worked with, what I learned from working with these people, and how you can benefit from that and apply that to your YouTube business. And today I'm going to be talking about Steven Bartlett, how I know Steven Bartlett, and how I actually worked with him on his first ever business. So let's get into it. Just so you know, I'm going to be reading notes off my phone just so I can stay on track with the story. So, in 2011, I actually received a DM on YouTube. Yes, back in the day, you could actually send DMs on YouTube. And I received a message from an aspiring teenage rap artist. And the message was something to the effect of, "Hey Jarmain, I'm moving to Manchester. Do you know of any music studios where I can record some music?" And this message that I received, it was actually from Steven Bartlett. So he was an aspiring rap artist at the time. But at this point as well, I was a very well-known rap battler / rap artist in the UK, but I also hosted one of the biggest rap battle events in the UK. So this is why Steven reached out to me. He was actually moving to Manchester to do a business course at university, but he was also an aspiring rap artist and he wanted to work with me. Now, we didn't collaborate on any music, but we actually teamed up and did some street battles against different rappers in the streets of Manchester. We actually used to meet up every Saturday at a thing called the Saturday Cypher, and different rappers from all around the UK would meet up and battle against each other and have freestyle cyphers. Now, there is actually footage of this. I'm not going to show the entire battle because obviously I don't want to present Steven in a negative light, and I know that he's moved on in his career. But just to give some context to this story and just to help people visualize what we was actually doing at this time, I'm going to show a little bit of footage of one of our street battles.
Even though she's spitting wax, she's fucking showed you up. Listen, I'm wrapping it tighter. Tell your mum to get out of the side.
Get a fucking clout.
Yo, this woman stepped into the cipher showing no dignity. But this is a great time for you to try and lose your virginity. She stepped into the cipher during my round and put me in an awkward position. She battled me and she was the only fucking competition.
So these were some fun times, and he was actually a very talented freestyle lyricist and rap battler at this point. Steven actually came to a lot of my events in Manchester as well, and if you look on YouTube, there's a lot of videos of me battling at my event in Manchester, and Steven would often be stood behind me, just obviously soaking things in and just looking at the situation and trying to learn a little bit about the rap battle scene. I went to Steven's house on quite a few occasions. You know, we shared some drinks, we did some freestyle cyphers and stuff like that. But at this point, eventually, Steven kind of disappeared for a little bit and I didn't hear from him for a while. Now, what I didn't know at this point is that financially, Steven was struggling quite a bit. You know, he was in rent arrears, he had a ton of bailiff letters in his house. Things weren't going too well for Steven. Around 6 to 12 months later, Steven popped up again and he was starting his first business, which was called War Park. Now, War Park, it was actually like a student forum / notice board. And Steven approached me and he was like, "Hey, I'm starting up this new business. It's called War Park." And Steven wanted me to advertise his business on my event, on the videos from my event, and we came to an agreement. He sponsored the event, and me and Rowan from Don't Flop, we advertised Steven's new business on one of the videos from my event, which was called Don't Flop Blam at the time. And I think the video got 290,000 views, but the business, it didn't really do too well, and then Steven disappeared again. 2014, Steven launched another business called Social Chain. Now, this was a social media advertising agency, and this is where Steven's career really started to take off, and he worked with a lot of major companies and brands, and he worked with companies such as TikTok, Amazon, KFC, Apple, and he successfully generated hundreds of millions of dollars for this company. Now, what Steven did is he used his network to basically contact big influencers on Twitter, on Facebook, and they would put together campaigns and they would collaborate in sequence on campaigns that would enable certain brands and businesses to start trending on social media. And this is how much power Steven's agency had. He had the ability to generate millions of views and make companies start trending on social media. When I saw the success of Social Chain, it kind of blew my mind, and I thought, wow, this guy has really took things to a completely different level. It shocked a lot of people because people did not expect Steven to have so much success, but obviously behind the scenes, he was working very hard. Him and his team were very calculated in the moves that they were making, and it was paying off in a massive way. Now, at the same time as Social Chain, Steven also landed a spot on the Dragon's Den, which is, one of the most prestigious business TV shows in Europe and the world as well. And he was one of the dragons on Dragon's Den. He would basically listen to business pitches from young entrepreneurs. They would pitch their business ideas to Steven. And if he liked these business ideas, he would invest into these businesses. And I know he invested into a lot of successful businesses. And this TV show got millions and millions of views. And this boosted his personal brand even more. It boosted the visibility of his brand and Social Chain as well. And this just boosted his business into the stratosphere. And at the same time, I think it was around 2017, this is when Steven launched the audio version of what we now know as the Diary of a CEO. Now, in 2017, he didn't actually have a YouTube channel then. It was just an audio podcast on Apple. And then in 2020, this is when he actually launched the YouTube channel, Diary of a CEO, which started to generate millions of views on social media. And at this point as well, it was in 2023, Steven actually sold his agency, Social Chain, for £7.7 million. And at this point in 2023, after selling Social Chain, this is kind of when Steven went all in on the Diary of a CEO, went all in on his YouTube business and his podcast, which now has a total of 674 million views, and the podcast business generates $25 million per year. So my key takeaways from working with Steven and what I actually learned about his success, my first takeaway is know when to pivot. So obviously when I met Steven, he was an aspiring rap artist. The platform that we actually battled on was called Don't Flop. And this channel, it got millions of views, and it literally turned people from just regular people into YouTube stars overnight. You could literally get famous and get millions and millions of views on this platform. But one thing about the underground rap battle culture is there was not a lot of money in this business. Specifically for rappers, there was some money for, events promoters such as the owners of these platforms, but there wasn't a lot of money for rappers. And I'm guessing that Steven saw this and he realized that he wasn't going to make money. And most people don't realize at this point, around 2011, 2012, Steven was struggling financially. He was in serious debt. He was in rent arrears. By his own admissions, he was actually shoplifting for food at this point, and things were not going very well. This is why he decided to pivot away from battle rap and venture into online business and the podcast space. And this is something to consider with your business. If you have an idea, don't get emotionally attached to that idea, because it's highly possible that you may have to pivot and venture into a different business idea or a different career altogether. And I was actually reading an article recently about businesses, and it's quite common for most business owners to fail at least 4 to 5 different businesses before they actually create a successful business. So the key takeaway for you in this is that if you have a business or an idea, just don't get emotionally attached to it. And it's important to realize if it's failing, if it's not working, you need to be able to pivot and venture into something else. The second key takeaway that I learned from working with Steven Bartlett is use your unfair advantage. Now, again, in the rap battle scene, Steven wasn't particularly known, but one thing that I recognized from Steven is that he had a lot of confidence. Even as a teenager, even when he was broken at rock bottom, I always got a sense of this energy of pure confidence. And this is something that he used to his advantage by venturing into the online business world. Steven stepped into rooms with very successful, wealthy entrepreneurs and businessmen. He was very good at pitching business ideas and getting wealthy investors to invest into his business. And this is something that enabled Steven to take his career and his business to a different level by using his confidence, particularly in business meetings and pitching business ideas. And this is something that you need to think about as well. Whatever your unfair advantage is, it may be something different. It may be speaking to people face to face. It may be writing emails. It may be putting together business proposals. You may have a good eye for detail when it comes to fashion or graphic design or photography. Whatever your unfair advantage is, you need to lean into that and use that to your advantage. Don't ever put yourself in a position where you can't use your unfair advantage advantage because you're probably going to lose. So you need to really lean into your unfair advantage. And this is what I learned about Steven Bartlett, is he used his confidence as an unfair advantage against a lot of people in online business. And this is what made him so successful. Takeaway number 3 that I learned from Steven is mindset. Now, back in the day, I remember that Steven used to live in a place in Manchester called Moss Side, and this is quite a sort of ghetto place that a lot of people associate with gun crime and violence and gang violence and stuff like that. And I remember going to Steven's house. Steven was always confident, but what I didn't know is that Steven had a lot of debts, a lot of rent arrears. He was struggling financially. You know, he actually spoke about this in interviews, that he used to go out shoplifting because he couldn't even afford to buy food. He also spoke about how he used to go into like takeaways and put his hand down the back of seats looking for money to try and find money so he could buy food. So Steven was really struggling financially. But in one of his interviews, Steven spoke about how despite his struggles that he was going through, he used to film videos of himself imagining that he was rich and successful, and he would talk to himself on his camera and say, yeah, you know, I'm successful, I know I'm going to be rich. And he'd talk about like, yeah, the mainstream media are going to be interviewing me and asking me questions, and this is exactly what I'm going to say. So even though he was struggling financially, in his mind, he was still successful, and he was visualizing and feeling exactly what his success was going to look like in the future, which just shows like positive affirmations were a big part of Steven Bartlett's success. And you know, if you want to be successful, you have to believe in yourself, and you have to really visualize your success in the future and what you want it to look like. And this is a massive takeaway that I learned from Steven Bartlett, is his positive mindset. My final takeaway that I learned from working with Steven Bartlett is long-term success. Now again, going back to Steven's aspiring rap battle career, he probably saw that long-term, his career in the rap battle industry and the music industry wasn't really sustainable. And he saw that social media was going to be massive in the future. Because at this point as well, when I first met Steven, social media wasn't a big thing. The only social media platforms that existed at this point was YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. But obviously Steven knew that social media was going to be a big thing in the future, which it clearly is now. And this is why he started a social media advertising agency, because he knew that it was going to be big in the future. And obviously this has paid off now, because, you know, he has a massively successful podcast. His podcast gets millions of views per year. His podcast makes $25 million per year. And no doubt this came from his long-term vision. He was thinking long-term. He knew that social media would play a major role in online business. And this is why he invested early on into his podcast and into his YouTube channel. But anyway, that's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. And as I say, my key takeaways from working with Steven Bartlett is know when to pivot, use your unfair advantage, mindset, and long-term thinking. This was Industry Stories episode 1, and let me know what you think of this format, guys. Let me know if you like this kind of format, and if you would like me to do a second episode of this. I've got more stories about different people that I've worked with. If you enjoyed the content, consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.